The first hours after surgery moved like a tide. Neither of them controlled pain, swelling and receding, nurses materializing and disappearing with the certainty of stars. Ethan swam up through anesthesia into a world arranged differently. No endless hum of dialysis at his shoulder, a dull, insistent ache in his lower abdomen, a thirst that tasted like rain after drought. On the whiteboard someone had written the time of urine output with the exclamation point. He stared at it as if it were a miracle etched in dry erase. "Welcome back," Leela said, a smile creasing the fatigue at the corners of her eyes. "Numbers look good. Your creatinine is falling." "Falling," he echoed. The word a rope dropped into his chest. My ma'am. "In recovery," Leela said. "Hurting, stubborn, and already asking if she can sit up." She lowered her voice, conspiratorial. "We said no, for the moment." He swallowed. "Can I soon?" she promised. Soon took a day. He measured it in the rhythm of vitals and the careful parade of new pills that would become his orbit. Tacrolimus, mycophenolate, steroids tapered by fractions. Little shields against the immune system that might one day wake cranky and decide to overthrow the gift stitched to his vessels. Dr. Singh appeared, calm as ever, explaining the logic as if she were telling him a family story. "Your body doesn't know it's a gift. We have to teach it to receive." He nodded, hand hovering over the dressing at his abdomen as if to bless it. There was a bruise blooming where the catheter had once lived. He traced the edges of absence with relief that felt like superstition. When they wheeled Margaret in, he forgot the pain for a moment. She was pale, face slack from meds, hair flattened by the pillow, but the pulse in her throat beat steady. He reached for her without thinking, and she turned toward him in sleep, as if gravity had been rewritten to favor their axis. "Hey, baby," she murmured when she woke, the endearment escaping before pride could stop it. He laughed, surprised by the sound in his own throat. It stung his incision. He didn't care. Hey. They lay like that for long minutes, two planets pulled into the same small, bright field. Silence said more than any speech could. Then the world resumed its proximate business: pain control, incentive spirometers, the indignity and triumph of first ambulations. A physical therapist coached Ethan to the edge of the bed, then to his feet, then 3 slow steps with a walker. "Heel toe," she said, cheerful, relentless. He hated her and loved her by turns. Across the curtain, Margaret made her own first stand. Claire was there for it, hands clenched, posture coiled. "Don't look at me like I'm a glass," Margaret scolded, breathless. "I'm a thermos. I keep things warm." "You're impossible," Claire said, pressing a tissue to her sister's eyes. "Sturdy," Margaret corrected, and took for small steps that felt like crossing a sea. By the 3rd day, the pain learned manners. Ethan could reach his own water. Margaret could sit without bargaining with her spine. Dr. Carter visited early, coat over scrubs, fingers stained with the ghost of iodine, looking like a man who had been inside to many lives and remembered each one. "You're both exactly where I want you," he said, scanning the chart. "Creatinine continues to slide. Urine output is excellent. Well, pull the Foley soon. And you," he tipped his chin at Margaret, "your numbers are boring," which is my favorite adjective. "Your bar for excitement is low," she said. "In this building, that's wisdom." He turned to Ethan. "How's your head?" "Buzzing," Ethan said honestly. "Good buzzing." "Terrified buzzing." "The kind where you keep waiting for someone to say there's been a mistake." "There has it," Carter said. "But your feelings will take longer to heal than your incision. Let them." After he left, Ethan watched the light shift on the floor and tried on gratitude the way you try on a jacket in a store, awkwardly, with the sense that you haven't earned it and might never grow into the sleeves. At some point Josh slipped in, hood up, eyes bright with the joy he overcorrected into jokes. "So," Josh said, shoving his hands in his pockets, "you're a cyborg now. Part human, part Margaret." Ethan snorted. Explains the sudden craving to reorganize a pantry. Josh came closer, then stopped, as if unwilling to cross an invisible line. You look better, he said, too simply. I feel possible, Ethan answered, and both of them stared at the word before grinning like thieves who had made it to the alley. Okay, Shakespeare, Josh said, sniffling and pretending it was allergies. Say the word and he'll sneak you pizza as soon as the No Fun Committee lifts the ban. Immunosuppression, Ethan intoned, mock solemn. The No Fun Committee has a manifesto. Fine, Josh said. He'll smuggle you a kyle leaf. They laughed. Then Josh's face changed, the mask slipping. I'm sorry, he said again, not for the first time, but different now, shaped by what had almost ended and what had begun. I can't stop replaying it. Ethan looked at his friend's hands he hadn't before. They shook a little. I know, he said. Me too. But we're here. So let's not waste this by staying there. Josh nodded. A man agreeing to terms in a treaty he had prayed for. The fourth day brought the first scare. The night nurse noticed a small rise in Ethan's temperature, a little softness to his blood pressure. Labs showed a tremor in the numbers, nothing dramatic, but the sort of pattern that made professionals go still inside. It's likely nothing, Leela said, eyes gentler than her tone, which was factual by design. Early days can wobble. Well, draw levels. Adjust meds. Ethan tried to pretend he was calm. Margaret did not pretend, she simply folded prayer into posture. Dr. Singh arrived before dawn, hair in a neat braid, voice a soft metronome. Your tacro level is low. Well, nudge it. That fever could be atelectasis or a whisper of rejection. Either way, steroids will help. She explained rejection the way a teacher draws a diagram on the board. Hyperacute, acute, chronic, the choreography of cells, the quiet violence of misunderstanding. This is why we watch. This is why you'll be in clinic every week at first, and why you'll be bored with me by Christmas. Promise, he said. Threat, she corrected, smiling. They pulsed him with steroids that made his face hot and his thoughts bright as sparklers. The fever obeyed the authority in the order set. In the morning, his labs drifted back into formation. He slept afterward, a deep, slack sleep of reprieve. When he woke, Margaret was knitting nothing with her hands. He watched her for a long time before speaking. I was scared, he said. I was too, she answered. What if it stops? He didn't mean urine or numbers. He meant grace. Then we ask again, she said simply. And again. And again. He swallowed. I don't know how to be good enough for this. Good enough isn't a currency here, she said. Alive is. That night, when the ward quieted, he asked her to move her bed closer. Leela, who had broken 100 rules kindly in her nursing life, made to wheels squeak and to brakes click. They lay within reach. The ivy poles above them murmured like trees gossiping in a wind. I'm sorry, he said into the dark, voice hoarse. For the years I made home a place you had to walk softly in. For the times I chose pride over kindness. For the time I said you were controlling when what you were was terrified. For being 12 and cruel, 17 and loud, 20 and absent even when I was there. She could have said, me too. She could have pulled receipts from the drawer of her heart and laid them on the bed. Nights she had snapped. Days she had chosen work over watching. The good things she had withheld because she mistook withholding for teaching. She didn't. She said, thank you, because apologies are gifts, not debts, and because acceptance is how you keep them from turning back into stones. He turned his head toward her. Do you forgive me? I did, she said. Before I knew I would need to. That's the trick of being a mother. He closed his eyes, and this time the sleep that took him was clean. By the end of the week, they were a choreography. Ethan walked loops of the ward, each lap a petty victory. He pretended to minimize and secretly tallied. Nurses clapped from behind their computers. Margaret migrated from bed to chair to doorway and learned the geography of healing. the spot where sunlight found her in the afternoon, the pace her lungs preferred when the world smelled like antiseptic and second chances. Dr. Alvarez visited Margaret and pronounced her incision, complaining appropriately. "You'll hate me for 2 weeks," she said. "Then you'll forget my name and remember only the scar." "I won't forget," Margaret said. At discharge planning, a social worker appeared with a binder thick as a novel. It held their new religion, pill schedules, food safety, no raw sushi, careful with salad bars, sun protection, the drugs make you friendly to skin cancers, infection avoidance without agoraphobia, signs of rejection, numbers to call at 3 a.m. "You'll come to clinic twice a week at first," she said. "Blood draws more often than you think the human arm permits. This will feel like a job. Approach it like one." Ethan flipped the binder open and skimmed, overwhelmed by the ordinary tyranny of the lists. Margaret touched the page. "We've worked harder for less," she said. "We can do this." On the morning they left the hospital, Josh arrived with a balloon that said "Welcome home" in letters so exuberant they felt like a dare. Claire packed Margaret's bag with a competence that made sentiment unnecessary. Dr. Carter signed orders and shook Ethan's hand in a grip that conveyed more blessing than force. "Textbook," he said, with the satisfaction of a carpenter running his palm over a good seam. "Thank you," Ethan said, and it didn't feel big enough and never would. In the car, the city looked new, the same storefronts, the same stubborn pothole at Maple and 12th, but the light lay on everything as if it had just remembered how. Margaret rode in the back seat like royalty on a modest procession, Claire driving carefully, radio low. Ethan sat beside his mother and watched her profile the way you watch a shoreline after nearly drowning. At the apartment, thresholds felt like mountains. Claire fussed Ethan, moving like a man in a borrowed body, carried the light bag anyway. On the kitchen table, he paused. The bills were stacked, the fruit bowl empty, the magnet on the fridge holding the same crooked photo of him at 7 with 2 missing teeth. He put his fingers on the photo's edge and steadied it. "Home," he said, tasting the word. Margaret leaned against the doorway, hand to her side. "Home," she agreed. They lit the evening gently. Claire cooked soup that tasted like childhood. Ethan took his pills on time, one by one, honoring the contract that now governed his days. When the apartment quieted, he joined Margaret on the couch. They sat close, as if the space between them were the only wilderness they refused to leave unclaimed. "I've been thinking," he said, and she braced for a confession, a fear. "About the moon." She blinked, then smiled, surprised. "The moon? When I was little," he said, "I asked if it followed our car because it liked us. You said yes." He looked at her, face open. "I think you were right." She laughed, the sound spilling into the room like a warm light. "I always am." "Debatable," he said, then sobered. "But on that one, yes." They sat in the hush that follows a joke told just right. After a while, he turned toward her fully, words assembled carefully. "I can't promise I'll never fail you again," he said, "or be an idiot, or forget something important and make you want to throw a shoe at me. But I can promise this, I will not waste what you've given me. I will use it. I will live like, actually live. Help me figure out what that means." She took his hand. "Well, learn it together." He leaned his head on her shoulder in a gesture so simple, it reached back through years and unspooled knots. The window showed a slice of sky, pale and patient. Somewhere above the building, constant as arithmetic, the moon measured their promise without asking for anything in return. That night, sleep came late, but clean. In the brief wakeful hours between alarms for pills, for vital checks, for the new choreography of life, Ethan lay listening to the apartment breathe. He thought of the kidney inside him, cupped and connected, doing quiet work without applause. He thought of his mother, asleep in the next room, a woman who had broken herself open and called it love. He did not feel worthy. He did not feel crushed by that fact either. He felt called. Tomorrow there would be clinic, and the week after that, and the long rows of days in which nothing dramatic happened, and that was exactly the revolution. There would be walks that lengthened by a block, meals that tasted less like duty, laughter that arrived without checking the monitors first. There would be setbacks, too, because life behaved like weather, not like plans. He knew that now. He was not afraid in the way he had been. Fear had been a ceiling, now it was a door he knew how to open and walk through. He closed his eyes and pictured a shoreline. On it, stones arranged by a careful hand spelled a sentence only he was meant to read: begin again. He did. Recovery did not happen in one heroic leap. It happened in the crawl of days measured in pill organizers, in the sting of stitches, in the way Ethan counted his steps on the worn carpet of the apartment like victories scored in secret. At first, even walking to the mailbox was an expedition. Margaret trailed behind, hand hovering, ready to catch him, though she herself was healing from her own incision. Claire fussed over both of them with the force of two mothers combined, scolding Margaret for bending too quickly, reminding Ethan to drink water and not soda, cooking meals stripped of salt and grease. Josh visited nearly every day. He brought laughter with him, though it was clumsy at first, weighed down by guilt. He carried bags of groceries, dropped off notes from Kyle and Brandon, and hovered awkwardly until Ethan pulled him into the couch and shoved a controller in his hand. If you lose again, Ethan warned, in telling the whole world you cried at the sight of a needle. Josh smirked, eyes wet. Do it. At least you'll be alive to rat me out. Their laughter filled the small living room, bouncing against the walls like sunlight, startling Margaret every time. She had forgotten what it sounded like when joy didn't sound borrowed. Clinic visits became the new calendar. Twice a week at first, then weekly, then every other week. Blood draws, ultrasounds, medication adjustments. Each visit began with a nervous wait for numbers that could turn their lives upside down: creatinine, tacrolimus levels, white blood cell counts. Each time the numbers behaved, Margaret exhaled as if she had been holding her breath since dawn. Dr. Singh was always calm, her notes neat, her explanations steady. You're doing well, she told Ethan on a grey Tuesday in October. Your kidney is settling in beautifully. No signs of rejection. Ethan grinned sheepishly. Guess my body knows a good thing when it sees it. Singh smiled back. Don't get cocky. Medicine loves to humble us. Margaret squeezed his hand under the table, and he squeezed back. At home, Margaret's body healed more slowly than her mind wanted it to. She found herself frustrated by fatigue, by the ache in her side, by the way stairs winded her. But each time she faltered, Ethan was there. Sit down, he scolded one evening as she reached for the laundry basket. Doctor's orders. You're the patient, she retorted. So are you, he said, taking the basket from her hands. His grip was still weak, his steps careful, but his determination left her blinking back tears. For years she had carried him. Now, in small, stubborn ways, he carried her. One night, as autumn settled over the city and the leaves turned brittle gold, Ethan knocked softly on her bedroom door. She looked up from the book she wasn't really reading and saw him standing awkwardly in the doorway. Can I talk? He asked. Always, she said, setting the book aside. He sat on the edge of her bed, fidgeting with the hem of his sweatshirt. His face was serious, shadowed by the low light of the lamp. I've been thinking, he began slowly, about all the times I pushed you away. The things I said, the way I acted. I thought you were just controlling, always on my case. But now he broke off, swallowing hard. Now I see it. You weren't trying to control me. You were trying to save me, and I hated you for it. Margaret reached for his hand, squeezing gently. "You had every right to be angry sometimes. I wasn't always patient. I wasn't always kind. But you were always there," Ethan whispered, his voice cracking. "Even when I didn't deserve it. And now you gave me part of you. Literally. I don't know how to live with that." "You live," she said softly. "That's all I want." He leaned against her then, resting his head on her shoulder, the way he had done since he was a child. For a long time they sat in silence, the air heavy with unsaid apologies and unspoken love. By November, Ethan was walking farther, laughing louder, daring to dream again. He began talking about classes, about finishing his degree. "Not business," he admitted sheepishly. "I hated business. Maybe nursing. Or physical therapy. Something that means something." Margaret smiled. "I think you'd be good at that. You already know what it means to fight for life." He flushed, embarrassed, but she saw pride in his eyes too. The scars on their bodies healed. Thin pink lines, reminders etched into skin. But the scars between them, the walls of resentment, the years of anger, those began to heal too. Slowly, unevenly, but with a strength neither of them had expected. One night, as snow threatened the horizon, Ethan caught her watching him while he read on the couch. "What?" he asked, grinning. She shook her head, smiling back. "Just remembering." "Remembering what?" "How far we've come." He chuckled softly. "Feels like we've walked 1,000 miles. She touched her side, feeling the ache that would always live there, and thought, and it'd walk it all again. By winter, they were rebuilding not just health, but trust, home, family. Margaret no longer carried the burden alone. Ethan no longer shut her out. The silence that once lived between them had been replaced with conversations, laughter, even arguments that ended in understanding rather than slammed doors. The accident had broken them. The transplant had remade them. Not into who they had been before, but into something new, something stronger, something whole. Spring came slowly, as if the earth itself needed time to heal. Snow melted into slush, slush into streams, streams into grass that dared, inch by inch, to turn green again. In the Turner apartment, the windows were cracked for the first time in months, letting in air that smelled of thaw and possibility. Ethan stood at the sill, a mug of tea in his hands. The scar at his abdomen tugged when he stretched, but he no longer winced. His body felt different now, not as it had before the accident, but not broken anymore. Stronger, steadier, alive in a way he had believed he could be again. Behind him, Margaret fussed with the couch cushions, though her own scar still complained when she moved too fast. She caught him watching her and laughed softly. "You'll wear a hole in me if you stare like that." He shook his head, smiling. "I'm just trying to understand how you could give up part of yourself for me." She straightened, resting her hand on her side, then crossed to him. "It wasn't giving up," she said. "It was giving to. There's a difference." He set the mug down and pulled her into a hug, clumsy and fierce. For a moment, they simply held each other, mother and son, no walls between them. Claire knocked on the door then, carrying groceries, Josh trailing behind with his lopsided grin. The little apartment filled with voices, laughter, the smell of food. Life had found its way back in. Later that evening, after everyone left, Ethan and Margaret sat on the balcony together. The city stretched below, lights flickering like scattered stars. The moon hung high, calm and patient. "Remember when I asked if the moon followed us because it liked us?" Ethan said, his voice thoughtful. Margaret smiled. "And I said yes." "You were right," he murmured. He turned to her, his eyes steady. "I think it still does." She reached for his hand, their scars hidden beneath sleeves, their bond carved deeper than flesh. "Then let it follow us," she whispered. They sat in silence, not the heavy silence of years past, but the gentle kind that holds love without needing words. For the first time since the accident, Margaret felt whole. For the first time since childhood, Ethan felt safe, and for the first time in their shared lives, they both believed in the same thing: tomorrow.